Hi, welcome to part 5, which is the last building part of the crazy Pedestal video series. And in this part we are wiring up the console, install the buttons, do the wiring, install the IPACs. We have so much to do some configuration. Well, it's going to be a lot of fun, and this video might be a little bit longer.
What?
And the video after this will be the end result video. So kudos to you for hanging on for such a long time. Thank you so much, and let's get started. So we are going to install the Marquee screen now. I normally use Yamaha's ProLite series, like the 2820s, but this didn't fit in this box. So I ordered an industrial screen that is the DV240FBM NB0 and it's made by twscreen.com. It costs about, well, €400 including shipping. I will attach it with a Logan point driver. And because of the plexiglass front panel, it cannot go anywhere later. And here it is. Looks beautiful, doesn't it? Here I'm filling a small gap with some black caulk, so it looks perfect now. The next step is to install some speaker connectors, and I just use crimp connectors, or also called speaker terminals. Then I will need to install a 12-volt DC plug for the screen power. And just like the speakers, the other end will be attached to the Marquee panel mount. Panel mount for the speakers, HDMI and the DC power. And just for transport reasons, I'm fixing it with some PA glue and an activator. And I will solder everything in place. Yeah, looks awesome. Let's attach the stainless steel arms and let's test it for the first time in my office. And the screen works, it looks perfect. Very sharp, very bright. Nice. And now for the other screen, I didn't account for the thickness of the HDMI cable, so I need to cut a part out. And instead of doing this with a router, I am doing it old style with a sharp chisel. And you can see that I didn't cut the artwork out yet. I learned that doing this after the screen is installed, you can get a much better result. Well, hot glue wasn't necessary, but I forgot that I had my Logan friend. If you need to take the screen out later for replacement, it's of course super easy if you just use a point driver instead of covering everything in glue. So let me apply a strip of caulk here. And done! The fan grills have arrived. 2x 140mm chrome fan grills and one 200mm black grill for the back door. And now let's attach the control panel for real. And again using some glue for extra insurance. And to power the system, I always use a power strip. And this will be connected to the power connector that has a built-in EMI filter and fuse in it. Connecting it is very easy. Blue and brown are your neutral and live wires, and the yellow is the ground wire. So connect ground to the ground screw terminal, and because we use AC or alternative current, the orientation of the blue and the brown wire doesn't matter here. A quick tip for mark your drill holes. Just apply some tape and mark out the holes. And now it's super easy to position your power strip. Done. I use two U-Trak size panel mounts, one for Ethernet and one for HDMI out. And this is the power connector with the built-in fuse and the EMI filter. And EMI filter means that it has protection for electromagnetic interference. Now get the HDMI mount in and we're done. So before we can insert the buttons and start the wiring, we will need to install the plexiglass panel first. And it has a protective layer on it. We need to remove. And I always do a quick test fit for some of the buttons and see if the panel is perfectly aligned. And in this build we are going to customize each and every button with inserting the control panel artwork that we cut out earlier. And this means open each button, take it apart, cut the artwork to the correct circle, reinstall it and fix it in place with a new transparent button cap. So let me demonstrate one for you. Let's get the artwork cut out. And I just press the button insert on top of it. Then I will carefully cut around the round shape, like this. It looks like a piece of her nose, I think. Now get the transparent Ultimarc button cap. And reinsert it. And this makes your button stand out so beautifully. To fix the buttons in place, you can use a push button wrench. I think Ultimarc sells them, but you can easily find them almost everywhere. And I'm super hyped about the result. The buttons pop out really well. It does take you about 3 times longer, of course, doing all of these buttons, but it's absolutely worth it in my opinion. To be able to operate the audio with the amplifier we installed in the previous video, we need to operate the amplifier a little bit. So let's take it apart first. And here you can see inside. And here are the soldered joints for the potential meter that controls the volume. So I just soldered the RGB fan connector to the potential meter, and I will solder the female part to the Logitech amp later. You can buy dual USB port panel mounts that are great for connecting light guns or game controllers. I use one on each side of the control panel, and you connect them just like you would with an arcade button, although the hole needs to be a little bit bigger. And now comes the huge task of wiring up the panel. And I will show you in detail how I would approach it. So let's start opening up the IPAC Ultimate Board. And the first thing you should do is find out where to position it. So take the harness you got with your board. And this version has 2.8mm and 4.8mm connectors on it. Connect it gently. And now check the length of your wires. And you will want to cover as many buttons as possible without using extensions or soldering. So this will be a great place for it. Let's make a quick DIY standoff using some small tie wraps. And this way the board will not bend and break while attaching it to your panel. And usually I like to start with wiring up the RGB cables first. It doesn't really matter in which order you connect them to the board, but to have a ready-to-go, perfectly synced up starting sequence when you power on the board, I choose the order real carefully. So leave one here for the joystick RGB. So here you can see the RGB ports. I left two open spots for the joystick. The yellow cable is the 5V and connected to the plus sign, as you can see here. So the connection order I used, starting from port 1, is player 3 coin, then player 3 start, player 3 joystick, then player 3 button 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6, player 1 joystick, player 1 button 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and 8, player 1 coin, start, and then the config buttons, start, exit, pause and menu. And about the mouse buttons, Ultimarc does not make 24mm RGB gold leaf versions. So instead I use the Senwa buttons here. You can easily make jumper wires for them. Let me show you. These are female to female jumper cables. Let me get two off. Another two. And this is a set of jumper housing and crimping connectors, also called Dupont connectors in Europe. And as the connectors are already attached in the factory to these wires, I just need to change the the connector housing from the two separate ones to one double one. You can lift the plastic spring with your knife and get the housing off. And just install the double housing until you hear a click. And the other ends I will cut off and I will apply the normal 2.8mm crimp connectors on them. They come in a small bag. Let's press it down. And you just attach it to 5V and the other one next to the pin next to it, as these buttons will only have one color and no RGB function. Now the IPACs need both USB and power. I cut a hole in the bottom of the panel so I can route the cables directly to the computer. And the IPACs come with a Molex 5V power connector included. So I will run this through as well and connect it to the board. And later we can connect them directly to the PSU, the power supply unit of your computer. And before I fasten the cables on the panel floor, I will attach the power and HDMI cable for the screen as well. And mount the Servostick control unit. And just like the IPACs, you can use the length of your motor wire to see what is the best position. I think here. Let's double check with the right side. Yeah, perfect. So now we need to attach power to the screen, attach the servo motors. We need to make connectors for all of the 4 90mm buttons. We need to mount all the joysticks, the Fightstick, install the Trackball. So this is the mini Gripstick, also sold by Ultimarc. And so here you can see me working on a special request. These IL competition joysticks are great, but they don't have any LEDs. So I customized them. I've added some LED strips with an RGB connector and drilled a small hole in the joystick and run the cable through. And the IPAC RGB ports can handle 2 LEDs on each port, so I can just connect them to the board and they will work right away. I got this great tip from Donald Ennis, who is a great arcade builder from the UK, or the USA, I'm not exactly sure. He does some really cool stuff with plexiglass panels, so I will link to his channel in the description. So let's install the other joysticks. The ports on the servo control unit are labeled. Just connect the red wire to the plus and the black wire to the minus label. This is the Ultimarc spinner, and you can just mount it like any other button. It needs a 28mm hole. And you can buy spinner heads in different shapes and sizes and colors. I did go for the black one here. And to connect the spinner, you just insert it directly in the IPAC board, and in my case the left board. The ports are color coded and labeled. So really easy to connect. Make sure you leave the rightmost pin, and this is the pin next to the brown color wire, empty. So from right to left, nothing, brown, green, right, yellow. Installing the trackball is child's play. We previously installed the brass inserts, so there's nothing left other than fixing in the screws. And make sure you do this by hand. If you're not careful and your screws are too long, you could accidentally punch them through your artwork and into your plexiglass. Been there and done that. Well, getting the measurements correct in your design is just a matter of trial and error. And now I have the absolute perfect dimensions and depth. So I'm really happy with this level of detail here. And if you like your trackball to light up, you can choose for the white pearl ball color and buy the U-Trak RGB LED Illumination Kit from Ultimarc. And this is just a small PCB with some RGB LEDs on it. You can mount it directly on the trackball and connect it to an IPAC board. Welcome back! In the meantime, I installed the HDMI, RCA and DC connectors at the back of the panel, and the inside is now a spaghetti mix of USB and other cables. I installed the 5-volt power to the screen. Did some wire management and tested the screen. It looks absolutely great. I worked a bit more on the Fightstick and I installed the cool chrome feet. And now it's time for the hardest part, wiring the buttons to the IPACs. So let me get the harness unraveled, connect it to the IPAC and get all the wires connected to the buttons. And here you can see a close-up of an extra IPAC controller I've lying around. So you can see the inputs are all labeled. Because I use two IPACs, I connect players 1 and 3 and the spinner to the first IPAC, and players 3 and 4 and the trackball to the second IPAC. So player 1 is connected to player 1, player 3 is connected to player 2 on the IPAC. And I will do the same for the right side of the panel. So player 2 connects to IPAC normal player 2 and player 4 connects to the second IPAC player 1, if this makes any sense. And if you're done connecting the colored wires, now connect every button to ground using the daisy chain harness. This comes complete with your IPAC, and there's no plus or minus here, so one connector goes to input port on the IPAC and the other connector goes to ground. So one by one, connect them all together. So after a few hours of wiring, we still need to connect some grounds together. Here. This one. Here. This one. New day! Time for applying the T-molding. And as I mentioned in one of the previous videos, I bought a nylon hammer. So all of you will be happy now that I don't damage the beautiful chrome on the strip. And this is actually quite meditative to do. For sharp corners you need to cut a V shape out of the T-molding. The tool I use for this was a tip from one of my viewers, and it's called a iWiz 90-degree strip cutter. And you can find them on AliExpress, I think. A great tool and faster than cutting the grooves out by hand. So flaw corners don't need any cutouts. Is that a word actually? Flaw? Is it flaw or shallow? Or Well, anyway, well, the opposite of a sharp corner. To get the joints perfectly touching, use the skirting cutter. I made a YouTube short about it. It gives you a perfect 90-degree cut every time, and it's super easy to use. And this is the Stream Deck. And I also have the exact, dead accurate dimensions for inlaying this into my panel, which is really nice. Welcome back. I installed the computer for the first time and installed the IPAC software, the Passmark Keyboard Test, the Servostick software, the Hyperspin, etc, etc. So now the most important part is testing if all buttons are connected and doing at least something. And to do that you will need to install Passmark Keyboard Test. So just press a button and see if anything happens. These are the mouse buttons, menu buttons, coin, start, joystick, and this one isn't working. No, it's not working. Up, left and down are okay, but right is not working. So we need to fix that. And there are always a few reasons why a button is not working. So you might not connect the ground wire to it. Or you connected the wires to the wrong terminal, and this is for the joysticks only. Or your button is broken. Or you connected it to an IPAC port that it's not yet set up to be a keyboard output mode, like the spinner ports or the trackball port or the extension ports. So in this case I didn't connect it to ground for some reason, so problem solved. While I'm at it, let's test the Servo Sticks. It is quite magical to see the arms move. So now everything is connected, the pinball buttons, the nudge buttons, the USB extensions, DC power to the amplifier, audio to the amplifier, service buttons, and I spent a long time doing wire management. So this is how a 53 full RGB panel looks from the inside after you're done. To connect your power button and LED to your PC, you can just create your own custom cable. But I found this really handy accessory. It comes complete with a PC case bracket with an exit hole, and a box with some LEDs and some buttons that I can just cut off. And a beautiful cable with pre-attached jumper headers that plug right in your main board. And they are labeled as well. So I just need to solder these to my power on off button and I'm done. So let's get the pedestal inside the house and do some last small parts there. So I will drill a hole for the power connector. And as you can see, I've attached some 2.8mm crimp connectors to the cable. So let me see if they are working. And install it in the panel box. To make your engraved logo pop out on the smoke glass panel, just fill it with an acrylic paint marker. You can, if you don't have a marker, you can just use acrylic paint. Then use some WD-40 spray and a piece of cloth to clean the excess paint. And it looks beautiful. Let me get it in focus for you. Let's get the hinge door back in. I cut another few millimeters off to make it fit just right. Time to power up the system for the first time. So, in the next video you will see the end result of both the Pedestal as well as the Fightstick. Thank you so much for watching, and please like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. See you in the next and final video in this series. Bye!